Sunday, February 18, 2024. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minutenews. Our guest today is the LA Times bestselling author of the novels Totally Killer, Father Mucker, and Empress, as well as 2018's Dirty Rubles, an introduction to Trump Russia, which Salon called required reading for all Americans. He hosts the podcast Prevail and has a Substack with the same name and a YouTube show called The 5-8. Greg Olear, welcome to the Weekend Show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So it's kind of timely that you're on, Greg, because the kind of Russia conversation is very much back in the news. And we should probably start by making mention of the death of Alexei Navalny, who it seems on Friday was potentially killed by Vladimir Putin in a Russian prison, a Siberian high security prison. They said he collapsed whilst on a walk. Obviously, that's highly unlikely, as there's a video out of him being quite jovial from just the day before. And we'll park that and get to it, because I think that the story of where we're going to go with Trump and Russia and the relationship, it probably, that's probably the ending of this story, isn't it? Killing of one's political opponents, which I'm starting to be concerned is actually Donald Trump's favored way of dealing with domestic opponents. He called recently for complete immunity for him and all presidents. How did you feel when you saw that post on Truth Social?
Well, I mean, he's going to say what he's going to say. And of course he wants full immunity. He's a criminal. He's been a criminal for his entire life. He's a second generation, mob money laundering guy. So I think the whole reason he wants to be president and wanted to be president in the first place was to get away with his crimes. So, for him to say that I have immunity, it reminds me of when I used to play with my brother, like at the swimming pool when I was a little kid, and I'd be like, I'm going to hit you with the heat ray. And he would be like, I'm hitting you with the ice ray. And I'm like, but I'm everything proof. Whoever got to everything proof won. Right. And Trump's trying to say, like, I'm everything proof. And he's not everything proof. Also, if presidents are immune to all crimes always, then Biden can just go around and do whatever he wants. Right. So that doesn't behoove Trump either. But, logic has never been his strong suit.
Trump has denied any involvement with Russia from, the very beginning. No collusion, famously, he called after the Mueller report. The Mueller report, to all intents and purposes, said that there was a relationship between the Trump campaign and Russia, despite his, claim of denial. And of course, we know how that played out. But really, the links to Russia and this kind of adoration that Donald Trump has for Vladimir Putin, it's becoming more and more explicit, isn't it? It's like he can't really deny when he's like Russia. He really can't deny that there are significant connections there.
I mean, he can deny and he will deny, but from where I sit, this was obvious in the first time around. Hillary Clinton said he was Putin's puppet in the second debate in 2016, yeah. October 2016. And as usual, she was right. This guy has been Russiaed up since at least the 80s, the early 80s, if you go by Craig Unger's book, the new book that he put out that has Trump, dealing with the guy that owned the TV store in New York City in, I think, 82. He was selling condos in Trump Tower to, people with connections to the Russian mafia and organized crime in 84, 85. He was the only person in New York that would accept, these shadowy deals. So people bought into his Trump Tower there. I mean, lots of Russians lived at Trump Tower when Semyon Mogilevich sent Ivankov, one of his top lieutenants, to the United States, to just take over the operations here, the mob operations. The FBI couldn't find him for a while. And then he turned up at the Taj Mahal, the Trump Taj Mahal. He visited the Soviet Union with Ivana in, I think, 87. Before he visited there, he had never really expressed any interest in running for office or anything like that. As soon as he came back in '88, suddenly he was interested in running for office. Roger Stone, I believe, worked with him even back then to try to cultivate this thing. And in '88, he tried a run. It lasted like a couple days, and it failed. So he's been dealing with the Russians for all this time. I think I forget if it was Eric or Donald saying in the lead up to the 16 election, lots of our business comes from Russia. I mean, he was in Moscow for the beauty pageant thing, where he stayed famously at the Ritz-Carlton in the presidential suite, where something untoward may have happened, depending on.
This is the compromat, the PP tape, which hopefully we will never see.
If this was a TV show, and I like to think about it sometimes for my own sanity as a TV show, we're in this is season 8 now. When we get to the end of the TV show, the Trump TV show, if it were a TV show, we would have to see the PP tape. That's how it would have to end, I think, dramatically. But you're right. Yeah, I don't even know if it exists. It doesn't matter if it exists. I think in some sense, people jumped on that. That whole dossier was not meant to be seen by anybody other than the people it was written for. And it was pretty clear in the dossier itself that he was writing down rumors that were not necessarily substantiated, just to, tell everybody everything that he learned or heard. And the media, of course, failed to understand that, even though it was explicitly stated. So
that was the Christopher Steele dossier, which was, and he was a British agent.
Yes. He worked the Moscow desk for MI6 for a year, so he's very well connected there, or was. And even he had some sort of thing with Ivanka Trump, so there's lots of strange things, but, in the lead into the campaign, I mean, in 2015, 2016, there's lots and lots of times when Trump's inner circle members met with high up figures who were close to Putin or the Kremlin or whatever. I wrote Dirty Rubles in 2018. It's out of date now because I wrote it for then. But the stuff that I list in there is all stuff that happened. He really did have the speech at the Mayflower Hotel in May or April or whatever it was that Kushner and Kissinger helped arrange with Dimitri Simes, who was a guy who turned out to probably be just straight up Russian spy. I mean, he spent a lot of time talking to Mueller, and as soon as he was done talking to Mueller, he went back to Russia and is now hosting a pro-Putin game show. So take it what you will. I don't want to accuse the guy of being, what side he's on, but his subsequent activities suggest, that he's maybe not on our side. And then there's just lots of other examples of times when somebody in Trump's camp met with somebody in Putin's camp. And he was so explicit about it. Remember, hey, Russia, if you're listening, that all this stuff that came out when he tweeted that was the day of the Trump Tower meeting, which, even I forgot about at this point. If anybody else had done this, it would have been done. It would have been over.
The Trump Tower meeting, for those who forget, was they met a female Russian agent, it turns out, supposedly about adoption.
Yes, which ties into Navalny, by the way, and all of that. And what's his name? The businessman, Bill Browder.
Right.
Natalia Veselnitskaya and other people who were clearly, had the direct line to the Kremlin, basically sent Junior an email saying, "Hey, dirt on Hillary Clinton. You interested?" And they were like, "Great, come on over." And the media tends to portray that as Don Jr.'s meeting, but like Kushner was there, Paul Manafort was there. Manafort, who had spent lots of time in Ukraine and hung out with these, Oleg Deripaska, like owed Oleg Deripaska money, which I can't even imagine like a worse predicament for someone to be in. So he knew. It's not like he didn't know what was going on, And from that moment on, he comes out and Trump tweets about these missing emails, and then it's off to the races. So there was, I think Roger Stone or Junior also was like DMing with that Guccifer 2.0. Jeff Sessions met with somebody, and Mueller investigated this, and some of these people got not only indicted but convicted of these things. So it's not like we're making this up. They like to take the word collusion. They don't like that word. They just make it all about collusion, which is a word that has a very specific legal definition, which is, they did not technically legally collude in the way that, the Major League Baseball colluded to make sure that Andre Dawson didn't sign a contract in 1985 or whatever year that was. That was collusion. This was, coordination, maybe, and, working together in some seen or unforeseen way. And just to be clear also, it is not normal for for people running for president and their staffs to meet with any foreign country, let alone the one that's been our enemy. This is where I would have sworn, Anthony, right there. Our enemy for what, since 1945? With maybe a very brief hiatus during the Yeltsin era, maybe for like an hour and a half. I don't know. So for Trump to go on and on about there's no collusion or there's no whatever, you're still rush it up, dude. Russia was helping him.
But it's projection, isn't it? I mean, when Trump says no collusion, he means loads of collusion. and this is, you might as well just take everything he says and reverse it and you'll get your answer.
Yeah.
But what does this say about the US's lack of background checks on potential candidates for president? Because arguably, if he was security checked, he would not have got clearance.
Well, I think that's a slippery slope, honestly. I know people want that. They want like psychological evaluations. They want security checks. I feel like that can be abused more than it's probably going to come in handy. And the security check is the election. That's the security check. The American people were supposed to decide whether or not this guy is okay, is on the up and up, right? So in a sense, it was a big media fail. The media tried to, with their both sides, which is Kremlin BS, right?
Yeah.
They are the ones that sort of equated Hillary's sending an email about some recipe or whatever to this stuff that Trump was doing with the Russians. Like he stood on stage and asked Russia for help. Like he did that. Yeah. And the idea that they're the same thing, even remotely, is ridiculous. And one of the things that I learned at that time, because as you said in my bio, I'm like, I was at one time a novelist writing fiction stuff and occasionally arts essays and, political essays here and there. I threw in with this because you almost have to have a novelist brain or process power to see all the pieces. Like, something happens with Paul Manafort and it appears in one section of the paper. And then Don Jr. gets divorced and that's in a different part of the paper. And then months later, so it's, how do you even keep track of all these people and who they are and who knows who? And it's just very difficult.
But doesn't that contradict the theory that it's the voters that do the due diligence on candidates? Because, let's be clear, the stuff that we're talking about, even the Trump Tower meeting, which has been widely covered. In fact, there was a very good drama on Showtime, I think, called The Comey Rule.
Oh, yeah.
That started with that scene.
Good stuff. Billy Ray. Yep.
With Brendan Gleeson playing a rather excellent kind of mafioso-style Trump. Yeah. But despite Netflix shows, the average voter, middle America, they don't know, they don't have time for doing the research or putting all of these component parts together. It's often a vote based on personality over policy, or, some vote for economy, some vote for immigration, or both. So this just goes back a little bit to the point that, the US now is not how it was in the 1950s, 60s, or 70s. It has changed fundamentally. And the fact that we are considering Donald Trump as the leading Republican candidate for president again, after all of this, goes to prove that the checks and balances, whether it be done by the voter at the ballot box or by the media or the security services or even the judiciary, Greg, has failed.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's clear. Look, Trump was impeached twice. Nancy Pelosi impeached him. Impeach just means that it gets sent to the Senate for a trial. That's all that word means. Nancy Pelosi did her job twice. So she could have done it earlier, maybe when the Mueller report came out, maybe, and chose not to. Maybe if she had it to do over again, she would have done it 3 times.
I'd have done it on day 5, by the way. The day that he announced the Muslim ban was the day I would have done the impeachment. But, sorry, carry on.
No, it's true. So the House of Representatives did its job. Then it went to the Senate twice. And, there had only been one impeachment of a president in the history of the United States, which was Andrew Johnson in 1860, whatever, 667. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presides over this impeachment. And as I understand it, per the Constitution, has a lot of leeway into how this is done. So John Roberts could have gone in there and really set a tone and gotten to the bottom of it. And John Roberts doesn't give a crap about this. John Roberts is a reactionary. He is a dark money guy. He wants to protect corporations. And he's, the shiniest, most socially acceptable fascist of the 6 fascists on the Supreme Court. And I say that, with very specific meaning, because if Trump gets elected again, the democracy is done. He said this, and these 6 people on the Supreme Court that he and Leonard Leo put there are going to, make it that way. They're going to rule with him. So you have John Roberts there presiding over the impeachment, essentially just scrolling on his phone and playing Wordle while this shit is going on. He's not even trying to, make it seem like a real thing. Like before we came on, you were like, "Don't swear," because swearing, it makes it too like unnewsy, right? And I
makes
just
it hard to share the show with your grandparents. I just
said the S word, and I couldn't help myself. But okay. There's a decorum that we want to have on your show.
And I understand it's difficult when the stakes are this high.
No, I was saying John Roberts could not have the same decorum that you have, presiding over the impeachment of a president that we all know is guilty. And the Senate also failed. The Senate could have the first time, and I'll never understand why they didn't get rid of him the first time. That was January 2020. If they had just gotten rid of him and voted to get rid of him, Mike Pence would have been president heading into the COVID period. He probably would have run COVID better than Trump did, even though technically he was in charge. I don't think Pence was in charge of anything. And he may well have won the election against Biden in 2020. But they chose to stick with Trump because, as Amanda Carpenter told me years ago, they need the votes. They need Trump's votes. The Trump people are not really old school Republicans. They're people that don't usually vote, that are only interested in the cult of personality. So they let him loose. Then he presided over the COVID period, which nobody likes to talk about. 1.2 million Americans are dead of COVID right now, something like that. And, people were going to die anyway. But if he had been competent, if he had not weaponized vaccination, mask wearing, all that stuff, and made it a political issue, right? So that his voters, his MAGA people don't want, masks, don't want any of that stuff. It's such a betrayal of humanity. It's hard to really even wrap my mind around. But if you go by, in New Zealand or South Korea or a country that did this better, and even if you say, okay, if the same percentage of people died in the United States that died in South Korea, there's something like 400,000, 350,000 Americans that died because Trump and Kushner and Pence screwed this up so badly. So that's what happens. Then he loses the election, and then there's the insurrection, all in a year period of time. And then they impeach him again. Again, Nancy Pelosi doing her job. And what happens? The Senate, again, lets him off. It's quicker this time. It's just, that's fine. If he had been kicked out then, which there was a week left, who cares? Then he wouldn't be running right now. But
it's the gradual degradation of moral standards, isn't it? The fact that they didn't impeach him for trying to extort Vladimir Zelensky, because for some reason, it didn't really matter.
Yeah.
Then January 6th, again, they fail to, as you say, kind of criminalize him, remove him from office. This cult-like mentality, it's almost like the cult was growing from 2016 through 2020. The cult is growing and growing and getting stronger, not just amongst voters, but amongst the House of Representatives, senators, people who see Trump as this kind of golden goose, and who does reach the extremes, the extreme voters who would have been marginalized in previous years because of their, by nature of being too extreme. Nazis, effectively. And yet Trump involved and invited everybody. Stand back and stand by. Find people on both sides.
Right. Yeah.
This kind of constant dog whistle towards the groups that are listening. Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, Hearing Code, the white power symbol.
Right.
However you choose to read it, this was, to all intents and purposes, a call to arms. Do you think with all of this stuff, including the connections with Russia, that Trump did it consciously? Is he smart enough to know the big picture here? Or are these all kind of isolated events of a madman that when you put them together, give the impression that he is a Russian asset?
He's not a madman. He knows what he's doing. I mean, he's very good at working the crowd and doing the thing that he does. He's charismatic. He obviously is entertaining to these people, and they like him, and he's good at that. That is a skill that he is good at. And I think our side likes to always think that he's just this idiot, which I don't think he's a smart guy. I think a lot of this stuff is instinct. Stephanie Koff, LB, who hosts the show with me, the 5'8", would say that he was trained, that the, these are skill sets that Russia and the Kremlin and the KGB developed over time, what he does, how he works the media and all this kind of stuff. I don't know about that, but certainly he acts like he is. He's very, very good at this. Roy Cohn was one of his mentors, who was a big mob lawyer, and, showed him how to do what he's doing. But I think he has the right mentality for it, because he's, I don't know what the DSM code for what he is. People say he's a malignant narcissist. I say, he doesn't care about other people. He cares about himself and feeding his ego. And, I think if you're going to be a dictator like he wants to be, or the leader of a cult, you have to be, soulless in a sense, lack empathy, not care about the people that are you're, kind of leading. And most of us, thankfully, are not like that. I don't think it's difficult to have a cult. You just have to want to and be enough of a horrible person to do it.
Yeah. Well, it's born of a personality disorder. And, he has been diagnosed as having this personality disorder, this malignant narcissism. The 37 psychiatrists, psychologists,
right,
experts have made this diagnosis. And, to ignore that would be foolish, because anybody who's ever spent any time in the company of a narcissist, let alone dated one or had one in the family, will recognize these classic traits. But it still doesn't, no one addresses that stuff. The media don't address that. They talk about him like he's sane, like he's a regular candidate. And it's their normalization of him that has been responsible for so much of his rise and his growth and his support, no?
Yeah. The media is absolutely culpable. They have a way that they cover elections, and they have a way that they cover presidents, and it's a template, and it's always the same, and they do not change it no matter what. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, I think. You want to get into the reasons, or do you want to talk about something?
Briefly, sure.
Yeah, like
revenue, I would suggest, is probably pretty high on the list.
Yeah, yes, but I from that's the top end, the executive people, the Les Moonves or whatever. But the journalists on the ground, the investigative journalists, want to do a good job. There has been, let's be clear, a lot of really, really fantastic investigative journalism during this whole period. The only reason that I know anything that I know is because I read it in the Washington Post, the New York Times, or the Wall Street Journal, or whatever, right? So it's not like the journalists aren't doing the job on that level. It's the next level of how the stuff is presented and who's writing the op-eds, how it is framed, which stories they choose to, go into depth about and which ones they don't. And how it's just a curiosity. And that's not necessarily something that comes out of, some sinister motive. News organizations are big, and they have news meetings, and it's hard to buck the trend on the news meetings, because it's like a huge ship. Turning it around or steering it is very, very difficult to do. If you look at Watergate, which is probably certainly the most famous journalistic thing that happened in the 20th century, so many factors had to be in place for that to play out the way that it did. You had two reporters who were very good at their jobs in Woodward and Bernstein. You had an editor that let them do that helped them and, maybe contain them when they needed to be contained. And then you had an editor in Ben Bradley who was like, go do the thing. I don't care. Go do it. And who stood behind them when they kind of like got in trouble or people were questioning it at the beginning. And they had a publisher in Kay Graham who just was okay with it. So all of those things had to happen for this big story to take place. So nowadays, I mean, the Kay Grahams are Bezos owns the New York. Like it's not, there's 3 corporations own the entire media outlet. And I don't like to be conspiratorial about it because it doesn't really traditionally in a journalistic outfit, the publisher and the editorial are not supposed to have any contact at all. I know that people think like Rupert Murdoch walks around the Fox News desk and issues commands. Maybe he does, but it's not supposed to be that way. Sorry, lip balm. So historically, that's how it's supposed to work. But anybody that's working at Fox News knows what Rupert wants and what Rupert doesn't. The Washington Post is very unlikely to go into an in-depth hit piece on Amazon, right? Because that's who pays the bills. So that's just human nature. So there's lots and lots of things that kind of make the media tick and give them the directions that they go to. And it's complicated. There's lots of different reasons. There's lots of different motives going on. So it's not just one big, oh, the media is awful because of this. They failed the job collectively, but individuals didn't fail the job. It's just the collective did. Like, okay, here's an example. Paul Manafort. Remember when Paul Manafort came to be the chair of the Trump campaign, which I think was in February or March of 2016.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who had been in Ukraine. Nobody really wrote that much about him. When he came on board, the way that it was framed in the media was that he had in, I think, 1976, brokered a contested convention. And they were anticipating that the convention, the Republican National Convention in 16, was going to be contested. So the way that the media reported is, this is an old guard guy. Jared and Ivanka call him the Count. He knows that nobody reported about the Roger Stone stuff. Nobody looked at all these dictators that he was working for. Certainly nobody really went into the Ukraine thing until it was too late. Like it was way after, and Paul Manafort was working with a guy in Russian's intelligence who specialized in sabotaging elections. Like that's the guy that he worked. This is in volume 5 of the bipartisan Senate report, Senate Intelligence Committee report on Russian interference in the election. So this happened. This is true. But the media is just like, oh, this is great. He's an old guard guy. And he's coming back to do this contested election thing. And nobody really went there for months and months and months. And, that's what happens. And it's hard. There's so many different people. Trump makes it hard. He floods the zone with S word, as per Steve Bannon. And it's hard to, it's hard to focus on any one thing with him because there's so much going on that's awful.
But we don't seem to have learned as a nation. And the media don't seem to have learned. And when he lost the election in 2020, and people were like, thank God we've seen the back of this guy. And he did go to ground for a little while, right? He hid in Mar-a-Lago. You didn't really hear much from him for a little while. He'd been banned from Twitter and various places.
Mm-hmm.
But then it all started up again. Once he realized that he was starting to see these kind of, these indictments, criminal indictments, there was this sudden desire to win the presidency again so that he could, find his own way to immunity. And the media just have forgotten. They have short memories. And so they're back on the Trump train again. And we see it with our own eyes. There was an article in Newsweek published in October. And it was actually, it was an op-ed by Monica Crowley, who's the former Assistant Secretary of the Treasury under Donald Trump. And the headline was, "The world needs President Trump now more than ever." I mean, the fact that Newsweek would even print that, knowing what they know, and I think there is a public service responsibility with news organizations that seems to have very much failed. And we have to take a quick pause for our sponsor, but I want to come back and talk about this moment that Donald Trump plastered over every newspaper and TV channel in the last week, where he says that he will actively encourage Russia to attack NATO member nations that haven't paid up their 2% of GDP. We'll come back and do that next.
February is Heart Health Month in the United States, and more than half the population would still benefit from blood pressure support. Well, Superbeats Heart Chews are the #1 doctor, pharmacist and cardiologist recommended way to support healthy blood pressure. And they even promote heart-healthy energy without the stimulants. Paired with a healthy lifestyle, the antioxidants in Superbeats are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. And with over 40,000 5-star reviews and counting, people are raving about Superbeats Heart Chews. I have to say I found them delicious, and they're now part of my morning routine. It's nice to know that there is some goodness going on inside. Supporting healthy blood pressure comes with a bonus. Superbeats Heart Chews support healthy circulation, so you not only get blood pressure support, you also get productive, heart-healthy energy without the crash. Support your heart health with Superbeats Heart Chews. Get a free month supply of Superbeats Heart Chews on all bundles and a free full-size bag of turmeric chews, valued at $25 with your order by going to weekendbeats.com. Get this exclusive offer only at weekendbeats.com. I'm excited to tell you about Moink. That's Moo plus Oink. Moink is a meat subscription box company on a mission to fight for the family farm. They're located in rural America, run by an 8th-generation female farmer. Their animals are raised humanely, their employees are paid a living wage, and the quality of their product is better than anything you'll find in a store. Moink delivers grass-fed and grass-finished beef and lamb, pastured pork and chicken, and sustainable wild-caught Alaskan salmon straight to your door. I've received one of these boxes, and I can verify that the quality of the food was excellent, and it tasted delicious too. Keep American farming going by signing up at moinkbox.com/weekend now, and listeners of this show get free bacon for a year. That's 1 year of the best bacon you'll ever taste, but for a limited time. Spelled MOINK box.com/weekend. That's moinkbox.com/weekend.
We're back on the Weekend Show with Greg Olear. I'm Anthony Davis. So Donald Trump's relationship with Russia is something that we're focusing on today. But explicitly, at a rally just a week or so ago, he brought up this conversation, this potentially fake conversation, some saying it was with Angela Merkel of Germany, but we don't really know, where he says they said to him, if we're not paid up members of NATO, will you support us in the event that Russia tried to attack us? And he said, if you're delinquent, no. And in fact, I'll encourage them to attack you unless you pay up. I mean, this is a former president of the United States from recent history, speaking like an authoritarian, but also as a asset of Russia. And he's doubled down on that, Greg, since. He was obviously been asked about it, and he has doubled down on it. I mean, he might as well be just waving the flag of the Russian Federation as in addition to his Confederacy flag and his Trump flags and anything else that he likes to fly. Because it does seem now that it is really that obvious, who this guy is and the kind of presidency he chooses to offer.
Yeah, I mean, it was obvious by Helsinki. Certainly anybody that watched Helsinki should know. But let's talk about NATO for a second, because I think this is important. NATO came about after 1945 as a way to contain the Soviet Union, but also make it so that the countries in Europe wouldn't go to war with each other. Other than the conflict in the Balkans in the 90s, it was successful. There's not been war in Europe, in Western Europe, for this entire time. The last time that there was this much peace in this much of Europe, you have to go back to the reign of Antonius Pius in the 2nd century AD in Rome. So this is a historical anomaly where we have this peace, where we have Germany and France working together, where we have France and England working together, where we have Italy and Germany working together. This did not happen for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? The map behind me, as you can see, is a map of Europe in World War One. That was awful. And then they decided at the end of World War One, we don't want to do that again. But 25 years later, they did it again, and it was even worse. So 1945 on, we have NATO. And NATO and the Pax Americana, the fact that the United States sort of took this leadership role in the world, for better or for worse, as a hegemonic power, or one of the two great superpowers, with the Soviet Union being the other one, brought peace. People bitch and moan about the defense budget, but one of the reasons why there's been peace in the world, or much of the world, for this long is because of the U.S. defense budget. So that's what NATO is. It's really, really, really important. And who doesn't like NATO is Vladimir Putin. He's always complaining about NATO. NATO wants to invade Russia. NATO wants to da-da-da. Dude, NATO doesn't want to. Nobody wants your country, Vlad. Nobody cares about. Nobody wants it. It's awful. You have toilets that don't flush. We don't care. And if NATO was ever going to invade Russia, they would have invaded it like now, when all of his army is in Ukraine, right? So it's never going to happen. So Putin doesn't like NATO. NATO is responsible for bringing this peace, or at least for supporting it. And Trump has been trying to destroy it since he became president. So it's no surprise that he would want to do this. And to whose benefit? It's Putin's benefit, as you said, flat out. This is Putin's thing. It's Putin's pet project. I don't even know what the right analogy would be. It's sycophantic for Trump to talk about NATO in this way.
There's a certain
and of course,
irony.
It doesn't work. The paying in, that's just stupid.
Well, but that's false as well, because 2% of GDP obviously means a different amount to different countries. The United States' GDP is the largest in the world, arguably. So the US pays more. Most countries are paying either 2% or very, very close to it. And so this really was just a ruse by Trump to try and give the impression that he was asserting his authority. But again, it could have been what Vladimir Putin said to him secretly at Helsinki in that private meeting before they got up on the stage. Mm-hmm. And Trump was asked, did Vladimir Putin get involved in the election of 2016? And he said, well, I asked him, and he said, no. Who am I going to believe, the U.S. security services or the guy standing next to me? I mean, again, that was a moment that he should have been impeached. There's a list of dozens. Yeah. But time and time again, Trump is siding with Russia. He's doing Russia's bidding time and time again. He's never said a bad word about Russia. He's also never even uttered the words Alexei Navalny, never mentioned Alexei Navalny. And yet Biden, when he was first elected, put a warning out there to Vladimir Putin about, keeping Alexei Navalny safe, albeit in prison. I feel like this double standard is something that, you and I might be able to analyze because, this is what we do. But to the average person, they hear him say, no collusion, Russia, 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 and in the next breath be supportive of Russia and celebrating Vladimir Putin. And yet people tend not to make the connection that actually he's just contradicted himself. I mean, that is the work of a master con man, a confidence trickster, that you can say one thing and then another thing and have people have, it's almost like they have selective hearing.
But it also, I think one of the things I've learned recently in the last couple of years is that there are people that actually just like what Putin is serving. There are people in the United States that want a dictatorship more than I'm comfortable with and you're comfortable with. And they might not care that he's with Russia. They might be for Russia. Tucker Carlson said he was for Russia on Fox News, right? When he was there, kept saying it over and over.
Yeah.
And that these are influential people.
Is this new though, Greg? Is this a new position, or has it always been this way and it's just been in the shadows? Because really, it's now is only really the first time that members of Congress, Republicans in Congress, and some senators are actually starting to talk favorably about Putin because and painting Vladimir Zelensky as the enemy in Ukraine.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the problem isn't even Trump. The problem is the whole GOP, right? I mean, like you said, there's congressmen, but the GOP as a whole is now dug in with Putin. And there were always some people who were, senators or whatever, like Rand Paul, who John McCain famously said on the floor of the Senate, "You were doing the work for Vladimir Putin." He went to Russia and met with Putin, delivered a letter. What was that? Like, that's crazy. Lindsey Graham, there's weird stuff with Lindsey Graham. Remember the Russian embassy tweeted that photo of Lindsey Graham in a pool. It's like, what's going on with that?
Yeah.
There was the senators and the one congresswoman who went to Moscow on the 4th of July, I think in 2019. Ron Johnson being the one that came back from that trip. And as soon as he came back, he's just towing the whole Putin party line. And I wrote a piece about it, like basically predicting it. And that's what happened, because that's what happens when you go there. Now this Tommy Tuberville, I don't know what his deal is. He might just be dumb. He is a football coach and a not very good one. So,
and he held up all of the military appointments, which made America weaker, arguably.
Yeah, no, he did not inarguably. He made America weaker,
and that again could have been diktat from the Kremlin. Who knows? Right,
or just some donor. I think if there was if we look useful idiot up in the dictionary, there's a picture of the guy that the 3-time loser of the Egg Bowl at Ole Miss, Tommy Tuberville, right? But these people were there and they're doing the bidding. They just are, the way they vote. And right now, not giving aid to Ukraine is just flat out, you're either, it's Manichaean. It's us or them. It's black and white. It's not, there's no nuance in the Ukraine war. You're either on the side of Ukraine /democracy, or you're on the side of Russia /totalitarianism. Which is it? And if you're helping Russia and you're in the United States, why are you even here? He'll take you there. Go room with Snowden.
Should we talk about why some Americans, GOP or otherwise, see a dictatorship as a kind of favorable formula for governance? Because I don't think anyone's really talking about that. And what worries me is that in its simplest form, it can sound quite appealing. You put all your trust in one guy, and he does all the stuff for you, and you don't really get to vote on it or anything. Just trust him, and this is what Trump is offering. Trust me, and I'm your man, and I'll deal with all these things, and I'll end the war in one day, and everything else. For people who don't have the time to do the research, or maybe don't know history, it can be kind of appealing. And people don't have the time here now, because as the economy is such in the Western world that you've got to work all hours to pay your rent and everything else. And so people are not doing their due diligence. And that is very dangerous, isn't it? So why do you think some Republicans see a potential dictatorship, whether a Trump dictatorship or a Putin dictatorship, as being the solution to all their problems?
Well, the main benefit of a dictatorship, if you're arguing for, is that they do have the ability to just snap their fingers and policy changes. One of the way that the American government is designed is that it requires compromise. So everything changes slowly. It's designed that way. And for the longevity of the country, it's for the best, even though it's frustrating at certain moments, certainly. But that's how it's designed, and that's how it works. If you're a dictator, you just say, "Oh no, we're not going to do this anymore." Trump can say, like, all we're closing the borders. Nobody else is allowed in here, and that would happen. For example, and some people want that. You have, people like Leonard Leo, who is and anybody who wonders about Leonard Leo doesn't know who he is. He was the head of the Federalist Society, and all these dark money groups, and is responsible for putting 5 radical Catholic reactionary justices on the Supreme Court. And he's best buddies with the 6th in Clarence Thomas. I've done a lot of stuff about him. I had a podcast this week about him. He has radical extremist beliefs. He wants to eradicate the wall between church and state. He wants abortion to be illegal. He wants, LGBTQ rights to be illegal. He doesn't like contraception. Nobody wants that in this country, right? The majority of people are never going to vote for those positions. They're just not. So the only way that somebody like that is going to get what they want, if that's the most important thing for you, and the only way to achieve that is through dictatorship, then okay, dictatorship it shall be, right? And, people have other reasons for doing it. I did a deep dive into the so-called Dark Enlightenment, or the NRX, the neo-reactionaries. And there is this we'll use the word intellectual, and we can put scare quotes around it if you like, but there is a thought process behind it. And it goes back to the manifesto written by the Unabomber. This is like their sacred text of these people. So again, this is who we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
And from what I've seen, they deal in the realm of ideas. In theory, this would be great, but dictatorships don't work in theory. They suck. And everybody who's lived in one knows that. If you ask anybody that's actually lived through a dictatorship or was in one of the Soviet bloc states or something like that, what they think about this, they will tell you, we don't want that. That's awful, And
Steve Bannon makes a very compelling case for this, though, doesn't he? Because Steve Bannon, I would argue, is one of these people. I've said on the show a couple of times that he's an intelligent person, and people in the comments like, what are you talking about? There is a problem where people are eloquent and they make a compelling argument and they've read history, and yet they still choose dictatorship. And Steve Bannon is one of these people who is very much pushing this Project 2025 Heritage Foundation scheme where, they're going to replace civil servants with Trump loyalists. That when it's said with, the great intent and with conviction, people just presume that it must be good. And that is very dangerous, isn't it? For a country where, again, people don't have the time or the experience to get under the skin of some of these policies before they vote for them.
We've just been very lucky, in this country. I'm 51 years old, and the country has always been free. And during my lifetime, the rights have just expanded, almost on a consistent basis. More and more inclusivity, more and more rights for more and more people. And I didn't have to go to war. I didn't feel the effect of any war, really. I mean, you could argue, I guess, the monetary effect of Iraq and Afghanistan, but the way that, the Dutch were literally starving to death in World War II. Like, nobody in this country in my lifetime has ever had to deal with anything like that, right? So we're spoiled. And most of the people who participated in World War II or lived through it are either dead or they're very, very old. And I don't think it's a coincidence that as that generation dies out and we lose the primary sources and the primary voices, this is when people go back and they do their revisionist history. This is where Sean Hannity can be like, Stalin was our ally in World War II. Isn't he great?
Yeah.
No, Sean, he isn't great. He's awful. He killed more people than Hitler. So, when you remove those primary sources, you can have people like Steve Bannon around who can twist the truth or do a revisionist history. Who's going to argue that was there? Nobody. We're getting to the point where, the people they're just not around to argue. You can have historians argue, but that's not as convincing. I think if there's one thing the American people love, Anthony, it's historians going on TV talking.
Yeah. I mean, I see it a lot. Talking of the Federalist Society, what's that guy's name? Is it Victor Davis Hanson? Is that his name? Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, he is he paints himself as a historian, and yet his perspective is so warped. It's so revisionist. it's so extreme. And because he's an old white man in a suit and tie, and he's, often at a university when he's being interviewed or something, that it gives credence to his far right, extremist, xenophobic policies. And yet the news organizations have him on all the time.
Yeah, I don't know why they choose to have him on and not the side of that's correct. Maybe I don't know. It's strange to me, and I don't. It's the whole popularity of Nazis now in this country is very, very odd to me. For most of my life, going to the movies, watching shows. I mean, you watch the History Channel. Like, Nazis are bad. We know the bad guys in every war movie. They're always bad. We know this, and yet now we're like, well, maybe they're. Maybe not. Well, no, they really are. So I don't understand it. I don't understand the desire to do it. Me personally, I just don't get it. But clearly there are people that, that need to have this revisionist view of history. And I think it comes down to the sort of mind that likes to see things very much in black and white and without nuance. This is a conspiracy because this person went to college with that person who went to, and world events don't usually work that way. Like, things are complicated, like people say you go to Davos and that's where all the rich people, powerful meet and they agree on the agenda of the world. And it's like, dude, 6 rich people couldn't agree on where to go to dinner in New York City. They're going to agree on that.
But this shift to the right and to the extreme right and to the rise of Nazism, it's not exclusive to the US. I mean, look at Anders Breivik in Norway, with that horrific massacre. These characters, these individuals who, they've done their own reading, they have their own agenda, they've been brainwashed in their own information silo. And even the Nazi rallies in Florida that Ron DeSantis refused to condemn. I mean, this type of stuff is happening not just in the US, but in other countries as well. Eastern Europe is becoming a lot more militant, Poland, for example. And so, we can sometimes think that it's just an American problem, but it isn't. The rise of Viktor Orban in Hungary, for example, which is, he appeared at CPAC conference. I mean, he's somebody that Trump and the GOP hold in high regard. Oh, if only America could be more like Hungary.
Mm-hmm.
This is a terrifying thing. Turkey, Erdogan, and then we know about Kim Jong and Trump's relationship with him, his bromance with him. I mean, this obsession with dictators and the extreme right is, Trump really opened the floodgates for that, didn't he?
I guess he did, or maybe it's been going on all along, and it's just now it's okay to come out of out from under the rock and show let the freak flag fly, as it were. I was in Berlin 2 weeks ago, and I talked to people from various countries. Poland seems to be in pretty good shape right now, from what my Polish friends say. So, but yeah, there are these rise of things, and I don't know. Maybe it's on some level. The idea of having kings is just, until very recently was just kind of how things were. And maybe on some level, people just like that idea. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't like the idea of having some kind of dictator. It seems like a terrible idea to me and a terrible way to live. And so everything is so contingent just on the whim of this person. If you get a really good person, maybe, but you're not going to, and you're certainly not going to twice in a row or whatever. So I don't know.
It's frightening that it's even a consideration that we're even having to have this conversation about the United States, which has always been, the images of immigrants coming to Ellis Island and that whole idea that you can really kind of integrate here is very much being rewritten, certainly with the language, the xenophobia towards asylum seekers on the southern border. It's been weaponized. This is a great country built by slaves and immigrants. And yet you would think that, the Americans had claim to it since time began.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there's always been xenophobia. There's always historically in the country been, we were here first. We don't want anybody new coming. And
Yeah.
any new wave of immigrant was always treated badly and had the low rung jobs and stuff like that. That happened in the 1800s, happened in the 1900s. It's just how it was. So I think some of the idea of, yay, come immigrants, we love you all, is, there's that poem, the Emma Lazarus poem, is really stirring, but it's not necessarily true or grounded in reality. And I think it's really looking back that you can say, the immigrants who came to the country, look at all this good stuff that they did. Look at how the cultures came together and created this place. The way that I look at it is that when people come here, especially from a lot of people from one country or something like that, it's usually because something bad is happening in the other country, or this group of people that's coming over has lost something in some fundamental way.
Yeah.
So you have these people that are coming here that basically their country of origin no longer wants them, right, for whatever reason. And we come here and we combine together, all of us, losers. And who are we? We're the top, man. So I think that's kind of an interesting story from a narrative point of view when you think about immigration. But
it's just painting them as rapists and drug dealers and murderers, as Trump says, which it's so cheap. It's such a cheap shot at people who are seeking a better life and often bringing their children as well. Who, and when you hear these migrants interviewed at the border, they are so desperate to come and assimilate and to work hard and to do whatever they can to contribute, and I speak as an immigrant myself. It's like, come here for a better life and do your best to kind of be part and be proud of your new home. And I do think a lot of that gets lost in translation.
I'll say this too. I was surprised when I was in Europe talking to people from different countries how pervasive the border problem and the immigrant problem, is, and people think that there's a problem. That talking point is everywhere. It's in China, it's in Eastern Europe, it's all over the place. Yeah. And there is a perception that Biden is weak because of the border or whatever. And it was interesting to me that the disinformation and all of the it's hard not to swear, Anthony. Anyway, all of that bad stuff has legs. I was very surprised.
Yeah. Well, Trump closed the border effectively, and Biden reopened the border. It's kind of as simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, we have to take another quick pause for our sponsor, but I want to come back and talk about Alexei Navalny, and I do think that the world is actually feeling great sadness for his loss. If indeed it's true, you don't ever really know with the Kremlin, do you? But we'll come back and do that next here on The Weekend Show. Are you self-conscious about your smile due to stains? Are your teeth aging you? Food and drink are known to stain teeth. Coffee, wine, they stain over time. So what can you do to brighten your smile? Well, you should give Smile Actives a try. Smile Actives is safe, effective, easy to use, and will keep you smiling proudly. I personally have been to a dentist and had a teeth whitening treatment. It was painful, it was uncomfortable, and it was not an experience that I would want to repeat. Well, simply add Smile Actives Pro Whitening Gel to your regular toothpaste. Do it at home. It's been formulated with polyclean technology to boost stain removal and deliver active whitening ingredients into teeth's grooves to get better whitening. People will start commenting on your whiter, brighter smile in just days. Smile Actives is the whitening boost your favorite toothpaste needs to give you the smile you deserve. Visit smileactives.com/weekend today to receive a special buy one get one free offer with auto delivery plus shipping and handling. That's smileactives.com/weekend. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details. Did you know Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the US with more than 10,000 different types of plants and over 2 million happy customers? You can grow lemon, avocado, olive or fig trees inside your home on top of the wide variety of houseplants available. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped directly to your door in 1 to 2 days. And along with their 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, they offer free plant consultation forever. I've received recently a lemon tree, an avocado tree, and a fiddle fig, and it looks like a veritable forest on my deck right now. For a limited time only, not only can you buy one, get one free on their website, but listeners to our show get an additional 15% off when using the code WEEKEND at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code WEEKEND at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code WEEKEND. Offer is valid for a limited time. Tell them we sent you. We're back with Greg Olear here on The Weekend Show. I'm Anthony Davis. The death of Alexei Navalny was announced on Friday. And, this is something, I don't know if you saw the documentary that was made about him recently, most beautiful documentary. I forget which network it was on, but it followed his crusade, his campaign, his arrest, multiple arrests, of course. Vladimir Putin tried to poison him on a plane. He recovered from that because the plane managed to get him to a hospital very quickly. Navalny has always been one of these kind of, rebels, somebody who is prepared to stand up to the dictator, to the might of Russia and the Kremlin. And Putin does not like to be questioned or to have his authority called into question. And Navalny was willing to do that at every juncture and had huge support. Let's not forget that Navalny did actually head quite a large movement of anti-Putin rebels. And so it was wonderful to see. And he had a beautiful family, a beautiful wife and children, and they feature in the documentary. So I highly recommend it. I think it might just be called Navalny Show. So the news is announced that he has died. And this is not something that we didn't expect. And in fact, he has suggested that it's something he was prepared for, because he knew that once he was captured by Putin, then the odds of him surviving were pretty slim, considering that Putin tends to poison people or make them disappear. What are the ramifications of this, considering that there is this war in Ukraine, that there is funding that we're, trying to seek in the Congress, which Mike Johnson wants nothing to do, diktat from Donald Trump? What is the political ramification for the death of Putin's opponent here in the US?
I think it's too soon to know, because it could go a number of ways, I think. As you said, Navalny himself pretty much knew this was going to happen at some point, and was hoping that it wouldn't, as we all hoped that it wouldn't. So what's interesting is the timing. Yeah. Why now? The method or whatever is not as important as the timing. This is the same week that Trump has, done the thing about NATO and talked about that. Yeah. It's the same week that Tucker Carlson interviewed Putin in Moscow, and in an attempt at propaganda, I think, in an attempt to normalize Putin for a Western audience, I think that was the point of it. And
it certainly looked like that, didn't it?
It did not work. Putin came across as stiff, boring, and then there were flashes of real anger on his face. And, even if you watch that and you just had the sound off and just look at the way Putin reacted to things, you can get a good sense of his personality. And then there's the votes. We're trying to get this passed to send money to Ukraine. World leaders are gathered this week also, and Putin can't go to Europe because he's a wanted war criminal. So maybe that stings a little bit. He wasn't invited to the party. So I don't know. There's lots of things going on. And of course, the Hamas war in Israel, which helps Putin. I think, but basically it diverts attention away from Ukraine, and it makes the argument for getting rid of Putin by what he's doing to Ukraine harder for Biden to make. So all of these things taken together, why Navalny, why now? Navalny himself said in the video that he made to be played when he died, that if he is dead for this reason, it means that we are powerful and Putin is weak. And I think that's true. I think, if you're a strong dictator, if you're really smart about it and you want to stay in power, it's, it shows the world that you aren't thin-skinned, that you can have this guy. It's kind of ridiculous to have him in prison, sure, but the fact that he was still alive meant something. Now it doesn't mean something anymore. It reminds me of MBS killing Khashoggi in a way, right? Somebody was critical of the country, and he couldn't stand the criticism, so therefore he had to get rid of the guy. So,
and Trump was complicit in that as well.
Oh, yeah.
Trump's complicity in the death of Jamal Khashoggi was really the precursor to this.
Yes.
You can trace Donald Trump back to the war in Ukraine. You can trace Donald Trump back to the war in Gaza. You can trace Donald Trump to Jamal Khashoggi, and you can certainly trace him to the death of Alexei Navalny.
Yeah. Yeah. But by getting rid of his political rival now, perhaps he's feeling heat and is afraid that, there's going to be a moment when the Russian people or somebody's going to turn on him.
Yeah.
And he's foreseen something, or he's getting more paranoid or whatever.
So he's flexing his muscles. Is that what you're saying?
He's just like the other guy, the chef. What's his name? I can't even remember his name now. I did a whole fake ad making fun of him before he died, and now it's Prigozhin.
Yeah.
You give me, Prigozhin looked like for a minute that he was going to go to Moscow and take Putin out and take over.
Yeah,
that was on the table for at least an hour and a half or something, and then the next thing you know, he's on vacation in Belarus.
Right.
That's where I would go on vacation.
And he was the head of a private army. When he wasn't working as a chef, or he was in catering, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was catering. Yeah,
and and I mean that's what's so crazy about these Russian generals. But it also shows the level of desperation that Putin had to reach out to a private army made up of ex-cons to actually fight the Ukrainians in Ukraine. And we all predicted the death of General Prigozhin, didn't we? I mean, it was always like, no wonder the guy's gone on vacation. He wants to get as far from Putin as possible.
Yeah.
And Navalny didn't have that luxury, though, did he? He was in a Siberian maximum security prison. His card was already marked.
Right. And in that sense, why bother? He's far removed from, we use the word Siberia when we mean something far and distant.
Far away,
He's literally in
cold.
Siberia.
Yeah.
What can you, I don't know that there was another step required. So the fact that he, assuming that it's all true, by the way, that he felt this was necessary now, I think that, to me, looking at it is a tell of something, and what, I don't know. I think it's still to be determined. The other thing that happened this week, again, talking about the timing, and not to suggest there's collusion between Trump and Russia, but
maybe just coincidence. This
was a bad week for Trump. You had there's the Georgia case. So Fani Willis was grilled, by that judge about the thing that happened, and it looks to me like they're trying to reveal personal information about her, and paint her as a bad person and an enemy of Trump. And this is where she lives, and she's with her dad, and she has $15,000 in cash in her closet in this state where everybody has a gun, where it's really easy to buy a gun. And I think that Trump, I don't want to think this, but I'm afraid that he's courting political violence.
Undoubtedly. I mean, that whole case to make Fani Willis the target of the case, as opposed to trying to overturn the election in Georgia. I mean, that's quite a pivot, but this is just racism. This is Trump seeing a black female, and as a strong white rich man, he's like, I will not have a a black woman bring me down, so I'm just going to go, lowest common denominator. And I watched her father on the stand on Friday, and I mean, I couldn't take my eyes off it. It was desperately sad. He was having to talk about his calendar and where he lives and where he's traveled to, and he's gone to a film festival, and I just felt so sad that again, an old black man being subjected to questioning by a white counsel representing Donald Trump. I mean, it was just awful. But this is the times that we seem to be living in, Greg. It's like nothing has changed.
Well, the other thing that happened is
the hat trick.
Trump's a little bit he's a little bit lighter in the wallet now, $364 million is $1 million a day for a year, less like Christmas or something. So does he have that money? Didn't he owe Deutsche Bank like $313 at one point? Like, how much debt does this guy have? And what will this do? Like, a lot of Trump's cult, the power of the cult, I think, comes from this idea that he gets away with stuff all the time, that he faces no consequences. And one of the problems with the fact that we haven't tried him for J6 or any of the other things is now he can turn around and say, well, if I did anything wrong, why is there no, why have I never been indicted, whatever. The Mogilevich defense, I call it, because that's what Semyon did. Now he has these cases against him. And the fact that he's a self-made rich billionaire guy who, has the gold toilet and the plane with his name on it and all this stuff. But now he's broke. This does take it knocks his power down. It's this one, it's 83 million more. I mean, we're getting on we're approaching $500 million that he's owed, and I don't know how he can wiggle out of.
Well, he's having to pay Rudy Giuliani's bills as well now. There's a lot of call upon him to pay his debts and other people's debts. But my concern is that it's always been the little guy who's paying their last dime into Trump's campaign or to pay for his legal bills or whatever. It's the regular voters, the Republican voters who don't have much, who, because they see him as this messiah character and, dictator, whatever you choose to call it, but they will literally give him their last dollar.
Oh, wait, can you speak up? I couldn't hear you over the sound of the violin. I have zero sympathy for those people, like zero. Trump has caused real harm to people who are and also not all of the Trump MAGA people are poor. There's a lot of people the people that did J6 were not poor. They had money.
We saw a few of them, didn't we? There was that woman who was a realtor, I think, who made a video before she went in and then complained about it afterwards. Mm-hmm. I understand that, but I do understand also that he is a confidence trickster, and he has brainwashed an entire movement of people. And we know from our experience of people who come out the other side of cults that they only wish, because invariably they've lost all their money and they've lost, a decade of their life and their family and everything. They come out the other side thinking, how did that happen to me? And we've seen that. I've interviewed a few people like that.
Yeah.
Pam Hemphill, for example, who's one of them is trying to, turn things around. But maybe our view differs on that slightly, but my feeling is that Trump will continue to grift no matter what.
Yeah.
And the more he needs, the more he will probably get.
Yeah, that could be. Well, we'll see. I don't have much sympathy for that. I forgot what I was going to say. Sorry.
Well, you're not born MAGA, are you? I mean, this is the thing. It's a process, and I feel like the confidence trick of taking the Republican Party, traditional Republican Party, and shifting the entire thing into the Trump camp. Beyond Donald Trump, who's not going to be alive forever, certainly not on his diet. I mean, what does that mean? You as an American, how do you feel about the idea that these two parties, one now aligned with Russia, aligned with the extremists, aligned with violence, and it was always the NRA, but there's so many more extreme aspects of this now, far-right Christian nationalism, for example, and the new Speaker of the House using the Bible as his guide, versus Democrats who haven't really moved from their position, trying to represent a vast amount of people with differing views. They are surprisingly close-knit and haven't really wavered. Democrats are providing the alternative, which is business as usual versus extremism. So what hope is there for the American political system even after this election?
Well, we'll see. I mean, one thing that can happen now that Trump has lost his money is maybe that breaks the spell. There are two things that can break the spell. Three things. He dies.
Yeah.
He goes broke for real, and it really broke. He doesn't have that's it.
He has to sell the plane.
Yeah. He's just wandering around the omelet station at Mar-a-Lago in his Walt Noda, whatever goes away, Nada. It's just him by himself. Or he goes to jail. So what I really wanted when he was pushing in that case, I wanted the judge in the civil case to send him to jail for a day or something.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it would have been really funny if he has all these criminal things and he winds up going to jail in the civil case. That would have been hysterical. But I think also the minute that he's in jail, that will break the spell, I think. I hope that it is. I don't think Trump, he might think of himself as a Navalny-esque martyr, but I don't know that his cult will feel that way. I think the air of invincibility is what keeps him, in line there.
Mm.
But getting back to what your question about the political parties, I mean, the real problem now, the U.S. government is designed, the architecture of the government is designed to have two parties. And they're designed to have two parties that have the same general overview, which is that we're committed to the country, we're committed to democracy, and we're going to work together and compromise to get to where we need to be. And if you look in the years leading up to the Civil War, the Compromise of 1848, and the Compromise of this, and the Missouri Compromise, and these were people that were literally fighting each other in Congress, still managed to come together and compromise for the good of the country. And of course, it didn't work and the Civil War happened, but the Civil War happened because some of the people decided that the Union wasn't as important as their own racism. So, that's neither here nor there. But since Newt Gingrich and certainly Mitch McConnell in the Senate, the Republican Party has stopped compromising. They are an obstructionist party. They offer nothing other than tax cuts. They just obstruct. That's all they do. And you cannot the government cannot function when one of the two political parties just doesn't do anything. It's like a seesaw where one guy's just not going to do it. You have to have two for the thing to work. So I don't know how to repair that, because the way that the Senate is chosen, and the Wyoming has two senators and California has two senators, which makes no sense at all. I don't know how to repair that. And I don't know if the Democrats are thinking strategically about it. I remember as soon as Biden got elected, Nina Burley wrote a piece somewhere about how we need Puerto Rico and DC to be states, like immediately, with the idea that when we have 4 new senators on our side and tip the balance, and, just like expanding the court, right? We can't, we have 6 reactionary weirdos on the court. It can't be that way. Have 81 Supreme Court justices. The more, the better, because it makes corrupting them harder, right? So, but it's hard to do these things. It's hard to do these things, and it's good that it's hard to do these things, because that's how the government works. That's how the process works. But, the fact that you want to do these things means that, a dictator for like a week and a half could say, okay, we're going to change the rules of the Senate, and but that's not how it works. So the Republican Party needs to die off and be replaced by something else, whatever Liz Cheney wants to do. She's the only person there that has the clout and the moral high ground to form a new conservative party. There's always going to be 2 parties in the United States. There's never going to be 3. It's not designed that way. There's going to be a left one and a right one. And right now, the Republican Party is neither. It's just an obstructionist thing that it's like a cement that's hardened around 1 foot of the people.
Yeah.
And you can't run anywhere with that. It's just not, every once in a while they'll vote on something, I think, to throw us off the scent. Mitt Romney will say, all right. And everyone's like, oh, Mitt Romney's so great. No, he's not great either. Bless his heart for voting to impeach Trump the second time.
Yeah.
But,
he never heard the end of that. But best of a bad bunch. In other news, on Friday it was announced that Joe Manchin is not going to run for president. That was a rumor, and it was going to upset the apple cart somewhat. And I think nobody was thrilled at the announcement, nor at the redaction of that particular thing. Finally, I would ask you. America is often referred to as an experiment. And, the experiment is in danger of failing in this next few months, because it really is a choice between dictatorship and democracy, between fascism and freedom. And I try to remind people that a vote for the Democrats is not voting for Joe Biden. It's voting for business as usual. It's voting for normality. It's voting for civility and morality and all of these things. And do you think that the experiment itself is in danger of imploding in the coming months?
I like that term experiment, but I think at this point in 2026, it's going to be the 250th anniversary of 1776 of the country, of the birth of the country. So I think the rules are, if you hit like quarter millennium, the experiment is fine.
Okay.
No state lasts forever. I mean, historically, it just doesn't happen. People have good runs. Rome had a good run. Byzantine Empire had a great run, 700, 800 years. British Empire was pretty powerful for, centuries. But stuff fades out. It just does. That's just what happens historically. So can we continue on? I hope so. It would be nice if we could. And maybe if something happened, if Trump were elected and they really clamped down on things, that process alone would be enough to trigger some sort of change, that we could come back from it and tweak the problems that are inherent in the way that the government is designed. Kind of like, in Britain, you had kings, and then Oliver Cromwell was there for a little while, and then you had kings again, and it was fine, right? So, maybe it would just be like a little brief period, but I don't want to take that chance. I don't want to take the chance. So I think, your idea of presenting this as a vote for business as usual is good. And people hate Biden. I don't understand it. People are like, in my family, oh, he's corrupt. What are you talking? Have you seen him? He takes the train to Delaware. He rides a bike. Like, what about him as a person screams corrupt? The other guy has a gilded toilet. What are you talking about? Yeah. I don't understand how people look at Biden and think, now there's a guy that has a lot of money scrolled around.
Yeah. But that's why I'm asking if the experiment is going to fail, because it does seem, I mean, I know we tend not to look at the polls, but, there was a CNN poll a week or so ago that put Trump ahead of Biden on the national stage. It's the sheer fact that Biden could lose because he's aging worse than Donald Trump, who's just 3 years younger. That the prejudice towards ageism is such that it will overpower anybody's fear of a dictatorship.
It's not ageism, Anthony. It's racism. The age thing is just a way to say, you guys don't want Kamala Harris to be president, do you?
Right.
You don't want a black woman to be president.
I've heard this theory.
That's all that it is. Like you said, he is 3-4 years older than Trump, and in much better shape, mentally and physically.
Yes.
His wife still likes him, which has got to count for something. So I don't get it. I think Biden is the best president we've had in this country in my lifetime. He's the best one since LBJ, and he's rising in the ranks. And I think, 50 years from now, if there's still historians and still books, and the entire planet hasn't plummeted, people are going to look back and they're going to rank him very, very highly, higher than Obama, higher than Clinton, certainly, higher than any of these people. I mean, what he's done, the accomplishments in the face of COVID, the pandemic, in the face of a rival party that wanted to take over the government and install a dictator, all of this stuff, and and in the world to try to reassemble NATO, and right now in Israel, he's it's hard to do diplomacy like that, and he's done as good a job as anybody can possibly do. So I don't get it, but I don't know. I hope that the American experiment doesn't fail. I will say this. If Biden is alive and reasonably sentient on November 8th, he is going to win. And he's going to win easily, because pundits on these shows and the people that write the op-eds get bored of the same topic. But Dobbs is not going away. People have not forgotten about Dobbs.
Yeah.
Women in this country have not forgotten about that.
Yeah.
And they're not going to forget about it. And Trump is announcing that he made it happen.
Taking ownership of it.
Whether they talk about it or not, that is going to animate the elections. And if you look at all these little elections that have happened, Kansas, these places that are traditional red strongholds, you see it. So I don't believe the polls are always wrong. And especially it's like February. Who cares? Lots of stuff can happen between now and then on either side. So I am very confident that he's going to win, assuming he's okay. So put him in bubble wrap. That's it. He needs to be in a room like you're in, protected from all
some
sides.
kind of cryogenic space. I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to finish. But Greg Olear, thank you for joining the Weekend Show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. This was great.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5Minute News. Download the 5 Minute News podcast and all of the videos that I make throughout the week. And join me next week with a brand new special guest and more factual news stories to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.